Oregonians have put forward a referendum to challenge a local urban growth boundary expansion. According to the latest numbers, the result was clear. 72% of North Plains voters rejected the expansion. We're going to hear from the North Plains mayor in just a bit, but first, Aaron Nichols joins us. He's a co-owner of Stoneboat Farm near North Plains. He was one of the leaders of the effort to prevent this expansion, and he joins us now. Aaron, welcome.
Thank you, Dave.
Why have you been against expanding the North Plains urban growth boundary?
Thanks, Dave. I'm not against expanding the boundary entirely. I'm against the specific plan for expanding the urban growth boundary. The plan that was rejected last night by 71.77% of the voters was a plan that would more than double the size of the city, adding 855 acres, primarily for industrial land, which appeared to be North Hillsborough-style data centers and that sort of thing. I'm a farmer, and that did not feel like a good use of our very best farmland. About 70 to 80% of the land that would have come in was prime farmland, of which we have only about 4% prime farmland in the state. It's rapidly disappearing, and I don't think data centers are the right use for good farmland like that.
City leaders, as you know, have said that they need to add these 855 acres to expand the city's tax base and to add public services. What's your response?
The city has said that they have offered no evidence to show that this would expand the tax base or that such a large expansion is needed. The city's own documents show that this would have the lowest number of jobs, lower than any other urbanized area in Oregon. Hillsborough did a similar expansion, also very near North Plains. It's costing them over $300 million, I believe, for just 200-acre expansion. The kind of money North Plains cannot bond and cannot afford. An independent analysis by a city planner here that who worked for our group, he found that this would cost around $200 million, including a large arterial road going through North Plains. Those sorts of costs, it is not clear how they would be paid by the sorts of industries North Plains was looking to bring in. So it is unlikely to me that it would have expanded the tax base. However, the argument that some expansion may be needed for greater tax revenues and for more housing is a legitimate argument. However, no city has ever expanded by this much, and so a smaller expansion is certainly possible and certainly much more suited to the rural town of North Plains.
What size expansion or where would you support?
So my group doesn't have a number. We're not city planners. Well, one of us is a city planner, but for the most part, we're not city planners. What we want and what we would like to see is starting a process now that is very inclusive, that includes people in the city in a way that was not done in the first time. So actively inviting people to participate rather than doing simply the minimum legal notice or less than that, as the city has done in the past, and also including people who will be affected by the plan even if they don't live within the city boundary. So people whose farms abut the expansion, people who will be affected by it should be included in this next stage, and from there we'll go and see where it is. I've knocked on hundreds of doors in North Plains and spoken to hundreds of voters, and I am quite sure that the people of North Plains do want some expansion. They do want some new housing, and many of them want new amenities such as grocery stores and that sort of thing. That all can be planned for. That all can be done in a fraction of the land that the city is looking for now.
After that door knocking, after those conversations, were you at all surprised that almost 72% of voters so far, according to the latest tally, said no to this particular expansion?
Our data showed 70%, so we were slightly above that, which is wonderful. I was surprised nonetheless, but mostly I was extremely grateful. The people of North Plains really looked at this issue. I think they really considered it. There was more data available, and many of the voters clearly had read it when I spoke to them at their doors. More data available now than there was when the city council passed it. The DLCD has weighed in and said that much of the information North Plains used initially were what they called incorrect facts. There isn't a need for North Plains to expand. It isn't required. It can be done at North Plains' pace and in a way that fits North Plains. And the city voters, I think, really understood and really looked at that. They're well-informed voters who have dealt with this kind of issue before. And it was gratifying to see that people who often knew as much or more about the issue than I did chose to vote with us. So I was grateful.
Just briefly, why is it that you think that residents should have a chance to weigh in on this in a yes or no vote to begin with?
Yeah, that's a fair question. This has never been done in Oregon before, as far as we know, and I'm pretty sure we're right about that. I think Oregon's direct democracy system is built for extreme cases, for times when there isn't a better way for citizens to weigh in, and I think this is a good example of it. In this case, the expansion was, like I said, the biggest by percentage basis in Oregon's UGB history. It was not well designed and did not fit the city, and it was honestly poorly planned. There were two industrial areas on opposite sides of the city that would have required some sort of large arterial between them. Many just kind of basic mistakes with the plan, and the city council was not responsive when people both in the city and out of the city came and talked about it. Hours of testimony, and the city council voted the first time with no discussion of the testimony. They used, as the DLCD said, incorrect facts to come to their conclusions. In those extreme cases, I think that we have a chance for citizens to say, we don't have to wait till the next election to get new counselors. Better to correct the problem that's happening here. Many of the counselors, I believe all the counselors and the mayor, are good people who care about their town, and the goal is not to have not to have people kicked out as happened in King City, but rather to have the exact issue that is upsetting to people and is a major change in their way of life, have that looked at, have that decided by the voters. This is something that affects that has more effect on people in North Plains and people around North Plains than almost any other ordinance that could be passed.
Aaron Nichols is co-owner of Stoneboat Farms near North Plains. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dave. I so appreciate you having us on the show.
For another perspective on this, we are joined now by Teri Lenahan, the North Plains mayor. Mayor Lenahan, welcome to the show.
Welcome. Hey, Dave, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Why was this particular expansion the right expansion for North Plains?
Over 20 years ago, North Plains went through the first urban growth boundary expansion, and at the time, they focused clearly on housing and did not even consider any type of employment land. So as our city grew over the years, and when we started to look at the urban growth boundary expansion again, this most recent one, we thought we need to factor in some employment land. So prior to actually adopting the ordinance, we went through the economic opportunities analysis process. We also went through the housing needs analysis process. Both of those documents were acknowledged by the state of Oregon, and the need within those documents showed that we did have a need for employment land over the next 20 or 30 years and additional housing over the next 20 plus years. So the documents that we used, took hours and hours and hours of, several years of public meetings, planning meetings with community members, volunteers, staff, regional, local, and state partners. So it's well documented that the numbers that we have presented show the need over time.
Your argument has not just been that this expansion should go forward, but it's that residents shouldn't have been able to have an up or down vote on it. In fact, the governor, the legislature agreed. They passed and signed a bill respectively to make that happen. A judge said, no, I'm going to let the vote go forward. Why shouldn't this be the subject of a referendum in your mind?
In my mind, it's a land use decision, and the state of Oregon has a process that cities are supposed to follow in order to expand their urban growth boundaries. North Plains has followed that state-approved process. If there was an issue with the state-approved process by saying it was not addressed as an administrative decision, and the state had to go back and clear that up and provide clarity actually for cities, so cities can continue to work. Now, I think it's important to acknowledge that every individual has a right to express their viewpoint and have an opinion about this topic. And it's definitely an emotional topic to talk about. There's a lot of tough questions, tough conversations that people have to have. And I get that. But if our land use system in the state of Oregon, and I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but if we put every land use decision to the voters, I don't think that we would ever see any progress moving forward. And it's my understanding that's not how this was designed to work.
Teri Lenahan, we will be following up on this because this is not at all over. The courts are still going to be weighing in. And this is an issue that I think Oregonians all across the state are going to be thinking about. But thanks very much for joining us today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. I really appreciate your time too, Dave.
Teri Lenahan is the mayor of North Plains. Tomorrow on the show, for the first time, the Oregon State Bar is going to be letting licensed paralegals perform some work that could only be done by lawyers in the past. We're going to hear from a newly licensed paralegal about what this will mean for the state. If you don't want to miss any of our shows, you can listen on the NPR app, on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to get your podcasts. Our nightly rebroadcast is at 8 p.m.